lots of employers not putting women first.
Indeed, and this is the gender pay gap data that is released today, of a particular interest to me because I was the Minister for Women and Equalities that introduced this regulation in the first place. And we did that transparency in order to see that transparency drive change. I think the concern that many people have looking at the figures today is if you compare them back to 2017, 2018, when they were first getting collected, they don't look like they've shifted much at all. Now, I think what's interesting, Christian, is perhaps from my perspective, if I was still Minister for Women and Equalities, I think I'd be having a refresh of the gender pay gap right now. I think I'd be looking at whether or not, when we see companies making commitments to get to net zero by 2040, 2050, whether we should be expecting similar commitments to get to gender parity when it comes to pay. But I also think we have to look almost behind the stats to understand that if a company is bringing in a long-term strategy on gender, that might well mean that at the lower levels in its company, in the short term, it is starting to get that pipeline right. In other words, more women coming into junior positions. And therefore, it may well be that part of this in the short term isn't as bleak as it looks, and it's actually a long-term strategy on more women getting into organisations in careers that will ultimately see them get on, and then that gender pay gap move in the right direction.
Is that not happening though, Justine? I mean, there are. If you look at the figures now for women in the boardroom, they're much healthier. Women in the workplace, much healthier. And we need to get more women back after the pandemic. But it's not translating through to pay.
I think what we're seeing actually is the transparency from the gender pay gap has told us that it's really, there's a motherhood penalty. Effectively, there's far less, if any, difference until women start having children. And it's often that time in their career that they really start to see the gap open up.